Okay, so today we're working on a 2008 Toyota Rav4, and it has a pinion seal leak. And you can see the oil is leaking out of this the front of the differential. Now to do this, the drive shaft must be removed from the front here, and then this support or clutch assembly must be removed from the front as well. If it didn't have these ears behind here, we'll be able to take it off, but we have to support the front of the differential and remove these two brackets to get this assembly off before we can get at the seal. So we'll pick up when we get the drive shaft off. So I've marked the drive shaft, as you can see here, one ear with white paint to locate it in the same spot, and remove the four nuts and washers. Now you don't have to take the drive shaft completely down. You can pry it forward slightly and then move it off to the side, and I've tied it over to the exhaust hanger with a reusable tie strap so it's out of the way. It's not necessary to remove it completely. So remove the four bolts that hold the front bracket, these four here, and remove the right side bracket. The left side I think we can leave there because there's going to be enough room. I can move the differential over to the right. Now before we remove this clutch assembly from the front here, we must disconnect the electrical connector that's up there, because that connector is going to pull through the housing and the wiring harness has to stay there. Then remove these four bolts and this clutch assembly should come off. Got the front pinion support off of the differential, and there is the electromagnetic clutch there. That's going to have to come off. There's a snap ring here that holds it to the shell, I believe. I'm going to check the service literature to make sure. And the wiring harness is unplugged at the back of this pass-through here, so this should come off. And the seal is actually inboard in there. So remove the snap ring, remove the electromagnetic coil. There's that pass-through, so push on this connector while you're prying that out carefully. And now we've got that off. We have 3 Allen bolts holding this race here, and I believe that's the seal right in behind there. So the clutch coil support has been removed, the 3 little 6mm Allen headed bolts. And there you can see the pinion seal right here. Now we're going to change that pinion seal. Do not disturb this pinion nut. And up on top of the differential up there, let me get the light on up here, you can see the vent. So we're going to make sure that that vent is clear, because if that vent is not, then it would build up pressure in the differential due to thermal expansion and potentially put pressure on this seal. So we don't want a repeat of this. And obviously we've lost most of the oil out of the differential, so we'll have to refill it when we're done. So there's the pinion seal. And I pried the seal out with this seal prying tool. Be careful not to damage the inside of the housing. We're going to clean up this housing here. As I said, check the vent and put the new seal in. So here's the new pinion seal number if you're curious. This is right from Toyota. So obviously the factory has the dealer has a seal driver, but I'm going to use this socket, this deep socket, that's going to drive the outside circumference of that seal in carefully. It's not that tight, so it shouldn't be that difficult. What I'd also recommend is this is the new seal here, and you see I filled the back of the seal where that little spring is inside here. There's a little spring in here. It's hard to see. There, I just pulled it out now. And if you pack grease in there, when you hit that spring will not pop out, or is less likely to pop out. Sometimes the shock from the installation tool will cause that spring to pop out like that. And best case scenario is you catch it and you see that and you have to buy another seal because you can't take it out to put it back in place. Worst case scenario, that spring ends up going into the front pinion bearing and destroys the rear end. So we'll make sure that that spring stays in place when we install this seal. So I just noticed that seal does not have a bottom. In other words, it can be driven in too far. So what I've done is I've driven it in till it's flush with the case here, and then this retainer here is going to press it in nice and gentle with the 3 bolts, and that'll ensure that it's installed at the right depth. That little lip will push it in further. If you push it in too far, I would imagine it may not seal against this housing here, because this is where it actually runs on. So here's the front housing cleaned up and ready to install. It's going to take a little bead of RTV sealer around the outside circumference of that. And here is the pinion seal installed. Now there are 2 washers in here that came out, and to make sure they go back in, I've drained the oil out of the diff. I might as well change it. And I was hoping it would stop dripping out of the pinion while it was in that position, but it still seems to be the low spot, so we're going to get some. So clean the mounting surface for the drive shaft and the back of the drive shaft flange so there's no rust, and reinstall the drive shaft lining ear, a previous mark. I put a paint mark on here so that I know which ear it was, and reattach the bolts, a little dab of Loctite on each nut for security, and we should be good to fill the differential and put it back in service. So the fill plug is on the back right side. I filled it with 80-90 or 75-90 synthetic gear oil, and it takes about half to 3/4 of a liter, and everything looks good. It's all back together, ready to go.